if you believe the great philosopher Whitney Houston, the future, you must believe that the future is the children. And if you treat them well, and so it goes on. She carries on and then reaches a lot of high notes that I can't reach. But the future of a young country like South Africa lies in our children, and they have been betrayed historically by ministries of education and basic education that seemingly didn't care about our young children. But now we do have a minister that cares, and it shows. And joining us today is the Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Gwarube. Gwarube.
That's it.
I'm learning.
Excellent.
I'm learning.
I'm
I'm
Bluetooth
learning.
and high five here.
Yeah. Siviwe, welcome back to the State of the Nation. The last time we spoke to you was just before the election.
Yeah.
It was. So congratulations on your position and the performance in the election, which was solid, I suppose, is the best thing to say. And since then, the country's political landscape changed dramatically with the advent of our first sort of coalition politics, because I hate this comparison with a coalition done in 1994 to completely different circumstances. But this one was a biggie, and you were part of the negotiating team for the Government of National Unity. So before we get to speak about the portfolio and some of the other things, I want to talk about that process of the negotiations, the Government of National Unity, as the President loves to call it. What were they like? They must have been quite fraught. You didn't have a lot of time, under a lot of pressure, dealing with a lot of people that perhaps weren't looking at the best interests of the country.
Yeah, look, I mean, thanks, Mike. And you're right. I was last on here in a very different country, I suppose. And negotiations were tough. I remember I had to live in a hotel for 30 days up here in Johannesburg somewhere. And we had to meet in secret. Because of course these had to be very tightly managed negotiations, and you are bringing together parties that have historically have massive distrust for one another for whatever reason, and you bring them under one roof to say, let's negotiate what the best deal for the country is. And it's tough because also there's now a ticking clock. And this is part of the reason why I do believe South Africa ought to change its constitution to allow for more time to be able to negotiate and put together a government. 14 days to put together a government is simply not good enough. And now that we've entered coalition country, I can guarantee you we're not going back to any single majority party politics at all.
Yes.
And so we just have to we now need to come to terms that this is the new reality, and we've got to make sure that our laws and our constitution align with that. So it was tough and it was interesting. It was probably the most interesting thing I've ever done, because, on the one side, we had the DA negotiators. It was me, it was Dr. Ivan Meyer, it was Alan Windy, Helen Ziller. Hope I'm not leaving anyone out at all. There were 5 of us. And then on the other side, I mean, the ANC had a full-on negotiating team. And there were at least at any given time about 12 different people. But what was also interesting was that's just like the dynamics, right? So when we would get to meetings, the ANC is very hierarchical in the sense that Gwede Mantashe would be the one through which people speak, through you, chair, or they would kind of just expect a nod from him if he can speak. And I mean, the rest of us are just well, no, I mean, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
And I remember this one time he was this is very chaotic. The way that you guys run meetings is very chaotic for me. And I was just well, I mean, these are the different cultures within the two organizations. So just those small things from just how you do politics in your own political party, how they do politics in their own political party. But in the end, we were able to reach a deal an hour into the sitting where we were meant to elect the president.
Yeah, but it seems like the distrust hasn't gone away.
Well, I don't think it. I don't think it will ever really go away because you are different political parties who represent a segment of the voter market, and at the end of the day, you're not going to. What you don't want is you don't want to be consumed or subsumed by the. And remember, as a smaller party in any coalition, you have to make sure that you still differentiate yourself from the bigger political party. Otherwise, all that then you are is that you are basically being consumed within the ANC or subsumed within the ANC, and you are just merely voting fodder for them. The people who take them over the 50+1 line. And that's not what you want to do because people didn't vote for you to be able to go lend them your vote and your numbers so that you can take them over 50%. There was a reason why the ANC barely made it to 40% in the election because the voters were saying and sending a very strong message. So the last thing you want to do is to then bring them back through the back door. You have to be able to say, look, South Africans have sent us a strong message. They've given neither of us a majority. But then what does that mean? It means we have to play fair. It means we have to get to the table and we have to hold each other accountable. And we have to do things better for South Africans. But we're not there to rubber stamp decisions that the ANC has long made because we're fundamentally of the view that some poor decisions have been made around the growth of the economy, around jobs, around accountability and corruption over years. So if we're simply going to go along to get along, then we're not really changing things, are we?
Well, you say that, but yet that's exactly how it's manifested, is that it turns out that one way or another, until we get to the VAT question, the budget question, you have been voting for it. You've just been there at their mercy to play with and do with what they like, right?
I disagree.
Well, let's start off with some of the really contentious stuff, and that was we know that the ANC, seeing the rocks in the future and that the ship was heading towards, passed a whole raft of legislation that they knew was contrary to where the DA stood. NHI, Bella Bill, Expropriation Act, and so on. And then suddenly, Mr. Man of Action, Cyril Ramaphosa, has never moved fast in his life, couldn't sign these things into law fast enough, saying, well, sorry, coalition partner, we don't really care about your objections. And you guys seem to be powerless to do anything about it.
Well, so first, I mean, I disagree in the sense that I don't think we've been voting for that. I think that if you have been watching the politics of the past 10 months, you realize that there have been a number of things that had come from from all three of those incidents. Firstly, the amendments to the South African Schools Act through the Bella Act, now that it is that number one, the conflict that arose from that entire saga gave rise to what was to be the political clearinghouse in the government of national unity. And whether you like it or not, Mike, the reality is that it was never in the interest of the ANC to have a functioning clearinghouse committee at all. It was in the statement of intent, but it never materialized. So that's the first thing. And so through that entire contestation, it was the first test for the government of national unity to say, well, look, we are coalition partners here, and so we've got to be able to go and clear these things and policy differences firstly at a political level before they manifest themselves in government. And that was the difficulty with where we were, because all three pieces of legislation had gone through Parliament with the majority that they'd pushed through. So you can't actually simply say, because you're a coalition partner, well, we don't like it, so shoot it down. Because you actually don't have a mechanism to be able to do that. So on the one side, I think that was a good thing that came out of that contestation. Because if we were simply voting for it, we would have just gone along, went and signed it and said to people, yes, we disagreed with the contents of the bill, but now we're part of the government. So we did not do that. And then secondly, I mean, we went through an entire process of saying, look, I mean, we recognize some of the good things, especially because this has to do with my portfolio. We recognize some of the important provisions within this amendment bill, and so these are the things that we are going to try and do to make sure that they are in the best interests of children. With the NHI bill, and the NHI Act, I would urge South Africans to go and read the medium-term development plan. And where, for instance, my dear colleague, Dr. Motsoaledi, would rather have, a number of the pooling of funds, of public funds to fund the NHI, and all of these things included in the medium-term development plan, you won't find any of those things. And some of these things are not things that we can crow about and say to voters. We can say to voters, we're fighting for you and for your interests, but there's also a limitation to how much you can talk about the things that you discuss within government meetings, or even with cabinet meetings and negotiations that flow from there. So I would disagree that we've been simply voting fodder. I think there's been a lot of work that has gone into this, and even as we're leading up to the budget, and as we led up to the budget, some of the proposals that we put on board, and even the fact that we were saying, yes, previously the finance minister would come the day of the budget speech and simply say, this is the budget speech cabinet, an hour from now we're going there. We said, look, times have changed. Yes, of course, this kind of policy making is within the realm of the Minister of Finance's ambit. But at the end of the day, the Minister of Finance no longer operates within a majority context. And therefore, some of these things need to be run past your coalition partners. So I definitely think that we've made our presence felt.
Do you think, as a negotiating team, that you were put into an untenable position by your own? I've got to say, in my whole life, as an old sort of poker player, I've never seen anybody tell you what their weakness is. But the fact of the matter is that, especially through Helen Zille, she kept on about this doomsday scenario, which immediately betrays your hand. We'll do anything except let those guys in. So in other words, walk all over us, trample us, do what you like. This is where we won't go. And which gives them free rein to do everything they like, because they know what you're scared of.
Well, I think it's not about what we're scared of. I think it's what South Africa can ill afford.
Well,
and so also you needed to let voters understand why you've been criticizing the policies of the ANC for 30 years, and now all of a sudden you are prepared to work with them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you have to say to them, we had two choices. We either were going to retreat into the opposition benches, or we were going to step into the ring, into the arena, co-govern with these guys, because the alternative is worse.
So, in other words, that message was for your own voters, to say, we are doing this because that's worse.
It's for South Africans, because I truly believe it's not just about DA voters. I think it's generally, there is a genuine fear in South Africa right now. You ask anybody in South Africa right now to say, look, would you prefer either an EFF ANC stitch-up or an MK ANC EFF stitch-up? And I think they will tell you, I would rather this government of national unity stabilize and everybody get on with it.
Yeah, but instead what we've got now is we've got a complete ANC stitch-up where they're back in charge, doing whatever they like, because they know there's a line you won't go near.
I disagree. I disagree entirely. I think that the ANC understands that we're not going to stay in the government at all costs, because there are certain things that we need to make sure that are done. And really, and without really, talking about red lines and whatnot, I think what is important is to go back to, why did we go into this government? We got into this government to push a growth agenda to create jobs. And if we simply stay along to get along, and we are not pushing for growth and jobs, people are going to look at us 5 years from now and ask, but did your presence make a difference in growing the economy and creating jobs, so that we can rescue the 30 million South Africans who are living in abject poverty?
Yes.
If we can't do that, then we're not going to be succeeding. That's what success looks like in 5 years' time.
Right. Before we're going to get there, but I want to just do a last thing. Let's ask the question perhaps in a different way. if this was what you were desperate to avoid, this doomsday scenario, what led your thinking that this is what the ANC do want to do? Because obviously each question should be asked from both directions. And I've made the point that, to me, if you didn't want to be in coalition, didn't want the ANC to be in coalition with MK and EFF, we know that they wanted it even less. So why give them the sort of support, the sort of crazy free ticket to do anything you like as long as it stops this thing that you don't want anyway? Does that make any sense to you?
It does make sense to me, but I mean, so what's the alternative?
Well, the alternative is to drive a harder bargain, which it seems like you didn't do at all. You got screwed on cabinet ministers, cabinet posts, right? You got screwed in Gauteng, and we here in Gauteng reaped that whirlwind. The metros are falling apart because one imagined, and many people, myself included, thought, well, surely this means that the deal filters through on all levels. Instead, we've got, you know how bad Johannesburg has to be for Cyril Ramaphosa to notice it, right? It really has to be so bad that even he can notice it. So, I'm saying that I'm struggling to see what you got out of this deal other than a couple of cabinet ministry positions and deputy ministry positions.
12. It's hardly a couple.
It is. Out of 70,000, it seems like. You guys need a separate tent just to house the leadership. It's hardly the deal of the century is what I'm saying. There's no doubt.
No, for sure.
They keep the levers of power over the money. They keep levers of power over foreign policy. They keep levers of power over everything. You're getting the jobs that they didn't want to run or they couldn't run.
Well, look, Mike, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it as an opportunity for the DA to demonstrate what it is that it can do at a national level. And I think if you look at the past 10 months, you'll be able to see that we've utilized that opportunity and that platform to showcase to South Africans what it is that we can do. You look at any of our DA ministers and the work that they've done just in 10 months. Just in 10 months alone. You look at what Dr. Schreiber has been able to do at Home Affairs, what Dean McPherson has been able to do at Public Works, what Soliba Lights has been able to do at comms and digital technologies, what John Steenhuisen has been able to do at agriculture. These are people who are showcasing that, yes, even we may have limited 6 cabinet seats, but we are showcasing that we are punching way above our weight. We're demonstrating what is possible to South Africans. And I think that if the government of national unity lasts, I think this is not the last you're going to see of the DA difference. And so I hear you as you say, look, it's not the deal of the century. I suppose I take the point, but it's also important to note that the metros were never part of the government of national unity deal. We were not able.
We lived that.
They were not part of it, and frankly, the issue around Gauteng and it saddens me that the people of Gauteng have to live through this. But for me, that was a massive ANC loss. Panyaza Lesufi gave a middle finger to the ANC leadership and said, I won't do what you tell me to. And so that's hardly something that the DA can take on. I mean, the reality is that the national leadership of the ANC could not instruct a provincial structure who had done so poorly in the election to be able to follow a party line, a party instruction. And so that wasn't something that we had control over.
So let's do this the other way. Are you saying that, let's use the DA as an example, were you powerless to instruct your provincial departments to do certain things if you had negotiated them?
How do you mean?
No, you're saying that the ANC's national leadership was powerless to instruct their Gauteng leadership. Do it the other way. Were you powerless to instruct your Gauteng leadership to behave in a certain way?
No, not at all.
So then why would they be powerless?
No. They were not powerless at all.
You said they were powerless.
No, I'm saying the DA provincial leadership in Gauteng was not powerless in that negotiating deal. They went and negotiated with the Gauteng provincial leadership.
Yeah, I've seen the documentation.
Panyaza Lesufi simply refused to negotiate in a fair way.
Yes, but
where he tried to simply say they'll get a cabinet post, a speaker position. It was an untenable deal, considering the numbers that the ANC was bringing to the table. So So Solim Simanga and his team were not powerless in negotiating. In fact, the FedEx gave them all the power and independence to go and negotiate. I'm saying that the ANC leadership at a national level couldn't instruct their guys to say, well, this is the way we're going.
But a deal seemed to have been negotiated to do something down at the lowest level in KZN.
Yes,
Right?
because they were able to, because the ANC was clearly able to speak to their provincial leadership in
Yeah, so
KwaZulu
in other words,
Natal.
they had the power to speak to them there, but not to speak to them here.
Yeah, but that's their problem, Mike. It's,
Yeah, but
it's
what
not the
I'm
DA's
saying,
problem.
it is,
mean,
because you could have driven a harder bargain.
No, I disagree. I'm sorry, but if the ANC provincial leadership in Gauteng says to the ANC national leadership, we're not going to listen to you, it's not for us to go and negotiate and fix their internal problems. They have an internal factional issue in Gauteng, and they have to fix that. It's not for us to go and meddle there. Similarly to how they were able to resolve the issue in KZN, ours is to sort out our own house. And I don't think that it's fair to put it on us. And it's unfair, of course, to the residents of Gauteng, but it can't be a can that we must carry, simply because we've got a coalition partner that has a factional problem. And unfortunately, that's how it is.
Let's go back to what you want to achieve in the GNU, and that is you want to be there and be all about growth and jobs, right? Now, I have not seen one action that supports what you've said, that's come out of anybody, right? I do take your point that yourself included, there's been a remarkable difference in where the DA has run certain portfolios. That's even Stevie Wonder could see that. But the point is that how and what and why and when are we going to see anything that moves the needle on growth or jobs?
Okay, let me break it down to it. Number one, our Deputy Minister Ashwell Deputy Minister of Treasury has been at pains to try and make sure that we influence the budget making process. And what do we say, but why do we want to influence that budget process? We want to influence this so that we are not burdening South Africans with a 2% VAT increase. We were able to drive the ANC to retreat from a 2% VAT increase because we understand that we can't tax South Africans any further, and you can't tax your way out of a growth problem. So I think firstly, that's a massive victory. And I think that to take that away from the DA and some of the parties that spoke up against it would be unfair. Number two, some of the work that Leon is doing at Home Affairs is directed directly at growth and jobs. The stuff that they're able to do to remove some of the visa regulations that are preventing tourists from coming to the country is directly related to growth and jobs, because we are able to open our borders to people who can come here with other skills or here to spend their money. Some of the work that Dean is doing at Public Works to essentially clean out the rot in the EPWP system is directly linked to growth and jobs, at least poverty reduction, because we are able to make sure that people have access to EPWP jobs, not because of their party affiliation. The work that they're doing in making sure that the construction work that they're doing, dealing with the construction mafia, is directly related to the issue around this. So the point I'm trying to make is that, and lastly, I want to make the point around what Solly is trying to do around digitalization and how we're trying to make sure that people have access to internet around the country, linked again to the idea around growth and jobs. What John was able to do, opening new markets for South African farmers, to whether whatever with fruit or whatever the case may be, it's linked to growing the economy. Some of the work that we are doing around saying we want to reorientate the basic education system to focusing on the foundations of learning at an early child development level, where we are saying strengthen the foundation of learning. Don't obsess about metric results. Obsess about whether or not children can read and read for meaning. I promise you that directly links to growth and jobs in the future. So the point is, we're not going to be able to switch on we're not going to wake up tomorrow and say we're growing at 2%. But if all of us can be able to push towards some of these reforms that we've been talking about from the opposition benches, I promise you we are doing everything we can to give effect to what we promised voters we would do.
And then in just one stroke of a pen which he found, it all gets undone with the Expropriation Act.
Look,
because that makes it impossible for the economy to grow.
Yeah, look, I mean that's part of the reason why we were opposed we are opposed to the expropriation bill, because we do believe that some of the provisions within the bill and within the act hinder economic growth. And so yes, Mike, that's why I'm saying we will win some, we will lose some, but at the end of the day, it is inch by inch closer and closer to where we said to voters we want to be. Otherwise, what is then the point?
Well,
and we then just leave a flank open to people who are not interested in delivering for South Africans, who are just interested in simply being there for themselves. And so I don't know. I would, if I was an ordinary South African, sleep a little bit better, knowing that yes, there's only 6 little ninjas there, but there's some people who are actually concerned about whether or not we're growing the economy and creating jobs for me and my children.
Yeah. Now, I want to know, talk about sleeping easier. How easy could you, as a senior member of the Democratic Alliance, be sleeping, knowing that pretty soon that your brand, your party, you as an individual, are in this government that are doing things that are in the worst interests of South Africa, whether you oppose them or not. You know, what I'm saying is that when the US come with their sanctions, and they start sanctioning leaders, for example, you're a minister. You know, at what point do you start giving that consideration?
Look, Mike, the reality is also that there are no simple answers here, and there are no simple solutions. Like I said, you can either say we want to keep our brand pure, we want to stand for what we stand for, we want to stay in the opposition benches. But to what extent? To what end? Is what I'm asking. You know, we can stay there, we hold the line, we really push, making sure accountability is pushed through in Parliament. I was a chief whip, I know that you can do these things, but to what end? When South Africans have starved the ANC of a majority, and then they say you have an opportunity to go in there and do something, do you then say, no, we don't want our brand tainted, we want you guys to know us as the pro-jobs, they'll say, but prove it. This is what we used to say to the EFF when they refused to get into government for the longest time. We said, stop crowing from the sidelines, prove it. And boy, are they proving it. But the point I'm making is that at least voters can judge them on a track record. And for me, yes, it's a risk of saying, oh, well, I mean, we are now within this government and we have to act as a collective. But it would be a bigger risk, in my mind, to say to voters, we see that you've given us a 22% vote and a vote of confidence, but we're not going to use it to make any changes. We're simply going to rather so that you see us as a liberal party that's pro-growth and jobs, but sitting in the opposition benches. There's nothing wrong with the opposition benches. You can achieve a lot from there. But I think that an opportunity would have been missed if we did not take the opportunity to get into government.
Now, it definitely could not have been missed by yourself, and I'd imagine some of the leadership within the party, that when the president decided who was going to get which portfolio, that he chose specifically to have DA cabinet ministers appointed to the portfolios that are going to get most affected by the legislation that you don't want. You're in basic education, most affected by the Bella Act being signed in, right? Dean McPherson, there for Expropriation Act. So it's quite clearly a tactic to have put you guys in those positions, which makes you look the most stupid, right? So in other words, we put Saviwe in charge of basic education, and then we drop this hand grenade with a pin out and say, there you go, implement this act that you've been moaning about.
Look, I mean, if your question is whether or not this was a poison chalice, I think not. I think that there's an opportunity here to do something great. And by that I mean, I don't mean it in such a glib way, like, there's an opportunity to do something great. I'm saying that our education system, Mike, has really left behind millions of poor black children. It really has. It has let them down, whether it is through physical infrastructure, whether it's through learning outcomes. Poor black children in this country have had a raw deal. And so, yes, I've had to deal with the contentious Bella Act, which seeks to amend the SA Schools Act. But Mike, compared to what we need to do to fix our education system, the Act has many things in it that we require as an education system. There are provisions there in that Act that there have risen, people have opposed to. But there will be regulations that will regulate how those provisions are enacted. In my view, that is but one part of a bigger task, which is to change our education system to deliver quality outcomes. And for me, I don't view that as a poison chalice. I view that as an incredible opportunity. Because if we get that right, if we get the foundations of learning right in this country, I promise you, 5, 10 years from now, and yes, of course, the GNU may not last that long, but 5, 10 years from now, you'll be able to see some of the green shoots that will come from this. So I don't view it as a poison chalice. It's a big, massive, complicated portfolio, but it's a massive opportunity to change the country and really fix inequality in this country.
One of the biggest challenges that faced any Minister of Basic Education was the South African Democratic Teachers Union, which for 30 years has been holding basic education hostage. What's your relationship like with SATU?
So I get along and I have a good relationship with all 5 teacher unions. And of course, SATU was very much opposed to my appointment right at the beginning. But I think that anybody who has kind of seen what it is that I want to do and what I am doing in the sector is going to find it a little bit difficult to oppose those things. And for instance, whether it is improving school infrastructure, improving school safety, whether it's improving learning outcomes, at the end of the day, we can all agree those things require attention. And also, look, I'm not hamstrung politically by by SATU as a trade union, whereas my predecessors were. Yes. So for me, it's a professional relationship with all 5 trade unions. Yes, they happen to be the largest one, but it's a professional relationship with all 5 trade unions. But they don't get to politically bully me because we don't have that kind of relationship. Ours is not a political one. Ours is a relationship between a trade union and a government minister.
And do you see then the return of things like school inspectors? Because that's the thing that they fought hard on, which was don't you dare see what kind of work we're producing.
No, for me, I think the most important thing, Mike, in this when it comes to accountability, more than school inspectors, is introducing is having systemic testing, because what we really want to do is we don't necessarily want people to go and patrol the schools. We want to be able to see whether or not quality learning and teaching is happening, and we can only be able to see that based on what the children produce at a standardized test that is marked at a national level. So at a grade 3, grade 6, grade 9 level, we need to be able to see. Otherwise, you're flying blind. This notion that children must come into the education sector in grade R and then you go and worry about how they do in matric is absurd. Because you're saying for 13 years, you're not temperature checking. You're not seeing where you're going. And so these systemic tests from grade 3, grade 6, grade 9 give you a good sense of where you are. And we know that from the systemic tests we took last year, that South African children in grade 3 are cognitively at a grade 1 level. Now that says to me we have a crisis. And the crisis is because we do not obsess about the foundations of learning. We only obsess about the outcomes right at the end. And so that's why I'm saying to you that the biggest strategic reorientation is to turn the system upside down as we know it, and put a lot of value here at the bottom and less at the top, and put in your resources, your teaching, your learning and teaching material, all here at the bottom, because then the rest takes care of itself. So and I think the international results and international benchmarking and international examples show that countries who've done this kind of investment reap the rewards. So I think it's difficult to argue against things that are, one, data driven, that are evidence led. And I would really want to see any trade union who would say, no, we don't want that. Because I think we all want to see our children thrive.
The parents should outnumber them eventually that do want the best for their children.
Precisely. So if you look at 13.5 million children and all of their parents, that's millions of people.
Yeah.
That's your biggest constituents, actually.
You're not fighting against just a few comrades. You're actually fighting against half the country.
Yeah.
So, when do you anticipate, will those results, have they been made public?
Yeah, so the results, the systemic results that we took last year, it was the first domestic ones because we are part of 2 international benchmarking tests, and we've been doing quite poorly. And you'll recall a couple of years ago there was a statistic around children in South Africa who can't read for meaning in any language by 10, and our own domestic tests are proving that. And so that is why we just have to move with pace. And so this is why I'm quite excited about the work that we're doing with early child learning. I'm excited about the fact that ECD has come formally inside of DBE. That's where it belongs. In any other country, you look at children from 0 to 18 from their basic education. That's actually where you should be. And so looking at some of the work that we're doing in the provinces, registering ECD centers, making sure that they have qualified practitioners, they have a curriculum to roll out, that they have a good infrastructure in place, that their children have 2 meals a day so that they are not stunted. Those things, those are where that's my focus. That's my obsession for the next year or 2, or however long I'm in the role for.
And you tackled one of those headline grabbers, which is a horrible headline grabber, but one nonetheless, and that was pit latrines. You went on a campaign. I know you came very close to eradicating them. Give us a quick update on where we stand there.
So things are looking great. I mean, things are looking good. I mean, I'm not, as I indicate to people all the time, that infrastructure is a forever moving target. So remember, this backlog that we are dealing with is a backlog that was identified in 2018. So we are about 97% of the way in clearing that backlog. But I want to institute another audit because, Mike, a lot has changed since 2018. 2018 is a long time ago. And so I don't want a situation where we tell South Africans we've cleared all pit latrines in the country, because that's not accurate. You've cleared the backlog that you identified in 2018. Now go back and check again, and check consistently, and report infrastructure problems consistently and fix them often, because these things matter in terms of the dignity of the children, the dignity of the teachers, but also their safety. So it's a forever moving target. You only get like half an hour to go breathe a sigh of relief, but then you get on with it, because there are still children who are still going to school in mud schools, unfortunately, in this country, even 31 years into our democracy. And that is the urgency with which we need to move.
Okay, so we are rapidly running out of time, and we could have been here forever. There's no doubt about it. But I want to just ask the one question, which we were going to spend some time on, but we're going to have to do it in a sort of a shorthand way. The Government of National Unity, according to you, you've put a lot of work into it. You've been there. You're a minister in the Government of National Unity. Obviously, we've analysed the budget situation to death. I see on the screen I've got my favourite thing, which is South Africa's moving debt clock, which is 4.5 trillion rand, which we contribute every day. South Africans pay more than R1 billion just in the interest on that. Nobody seems to care about that. Do you think this Government of National Unity is going to survive with the Democratic Alliance in it?
Look, I'm not a sangoma.
Yes.
I would like to be, but I'm not. But would I like the Government of National Unity to survive with the DA in it? Absolutely. There's work to be done, and I think that this government can achieve a lot. Whether or not we are able to get through this budget process, these negotiations with the DA still part of the GNU, I can't say. I know that there's very much commitment from a leadership level, from the leader side, and mostly for the leadership of the DA to stay within the GNU, because we see the value. We see the value of making a difference in the lives of South Africans. But how it will all end up or play out is difficult to say, because remember, we're not just dealing with the needs and wants of the DA here. We're also dealing with the internal battles and the factional battles of the ANC, which also influence how this process goes. And so, do I want the Government of National Unity to retain and to stay intact and be stable? Absolutely.
I want to ask one final. I did say final, but we got another final quickly. This experience must have been quite dramatic to the internal structures of the Democratic Alliance. Different place to be from where you were a year ago, I would imagine. There's no doubt about it. What has been the effect on the Democratic Alliance itself the way it views itself, the structures. Do you see that changing as a result of this experience of being inside government?
Of course, I think there's a lot of change. I mean, like you look at something, let me make an example. You just look at the parliamentary caucus, for instance. You know, you are no longer you're not the official opposition anymore. And so, you know, just even that is different. But at the same time, you also have chairs of portfolio committees within your own caucus. You're able to wield a lot more in terms of being able to say, we'll insist on better accountability from government. We will do this, and we can give effect to that. So at a parliamentary level, things have changed, and of course, sometimes muscle memory, you know, gets the better of us. But at the end of the day, things have changed, and I think they've changed for the better. But in terms of our structures, I think when I go to our structures on the ground, people are excited that we are able to say, look at what our guys are doing in government. Give us an opportunity to show you what more we can do. So from activists, at least in my constituency, they are saying, look, Siviwe, we want to see more of this. We want to see you guys do more in government, because it gives us proof points to say to potential voters, look at what they are able to do. And so lend us your vote as we're heading to the local government election, and perhaps we could do more.
And the polls are backing you up. Some of the polls give the Democratic Alliance as the only party making ground, and some of the parties that still use the old tricks are not.
But I suppose the real poll is on election day.
The real poll's on election day. We hold our breath until election day, but what a pleasure it is to speak to Minister Siviwe Rube.
Well done, Mike.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Well done.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I hope we don't have to wait until the next election before we get you back there. I'm sure everybody has enjoyed this. Openness, accountability, that's what it looks like. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Pace Car Rental that sponsor us, and to everybody that watched. Subscribe to the channel. We do the best interviews.